Time and place of these committee meetings was publicized by notifying the area news media, by publicizing same in the Omaha World Herald, OPPD outlets newsletter, OPPD.com, and social media, by displaying such notice on the arcade level of Energy Plaza, and by emailing such notice to each of the district's directors on October 13th, 2023. Thank you all for joining us remotely via WebEx events. As a reminder to board members, executive leadership team, and OPPD staff, please mute your microphones and cell phones to reduce background noise. Members of the public, thank you for attending. You are in listen-only mode. If you have any technology questions, please use the chat feature in WebEx to communicate with the event host. Our agenda for today's meeting is as follows. We will conduct a closed session this morning to discuss 4 topics: CEO growth and effectiveness update, integrated operations system engineering certificate, acquisition of land rights for enterprise operations technology communications network asset, and customer growth update. We will conclude this morning session no later than 9:50 a.m. in order to open the WebEx meeting to allow the public and OPPD staff to join. We will begin public session at approximately 10 o'clock a.m. and receive reports from each committee. Director Bogner, do we have a motion to go into closed session?
We do. I move that the board go into closed session at this time, 8:01 a.m. to discuss 4 topics: CEO growth and effectiveness update, integrated operations center and engineer's certificate, acquisition of land rights for enterprise operations technology communication network asset, and finally, the customer growth update. With respect to the CEO growth effectiveness update, a closed session is necessary because the discussion will involve competitive and confidential compensation and retention information, as well as performance evaluation information. With respect to the Integrated Operations Center for the Engineer's Certificate, a closed session is necessary for the protection of the public interest because the discussion involves sensitive utility infrastructure information. The confidential cost information, the disclosure of which would disadvantage the district in future negotiations with potential contractors. With respect to the acquisition of land rights for enterprise operations technology communication network asset, a closed session is necessary for the protection of the public interest because the discussion involves matters that are confidential and protected by the attorney-client privilege and attorney work product doctrine, and involve the discussion of security for district property and utility infrastructure information. With respect to the customer growth update, a closed session is necessary because the discussion will involve competitively sensitive customer information. This requires a second.
Second.
Director Bogner?
Yes.
Director Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Director Ford?
Yes.
Director Howard? Yes. Director Mulhall? Director Moody?
Yes.
Director Spurgeon?
Yes.
Director Williams?
Yes. The motion to go into closed session has passed. This closed session will be limited to discussion regarding 4 topics: CEO growth and effectiveness update, integrated operations center engineer's certification, acquisition of land rights for enterprise operation technology communication network asset, and customer growth update. Motion and a second is required to reconvene in open session.
So moved.
Second. Director Bogner?
Yes.
Director Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Director Ford?
Yes.
Director Howard?
Yes.
Director Mulhall? Yes. Director Moody?
Yes.
Director Spurgeon?
Yes.
Director Williams?
Yes. The motion to come out of closed session at 10:18 a.m. is carried. This closed session is limited to discussion regarding 4 topics: CEO growth and effectiveness update, integrated operations center engineer's certification, acquisition of land rights for enterprise operations technology communication network asset, and customer growth update. Notice of the time and place of these committee meetings was publicized by notifying the area news media, by publicizing same in the Omaha World Herald, OPPD outlets newsletter, OPPD.com, and social media, by displaying such notice on the arcade level of Energy Plaza, and by emailing such notice to each of the district's directors on October 13th, 2023. Thank you all for joining us remotely via WebEx events. As a reminder to board members, executive leadership team, and OPPD staff, please mute your microphone and your cell phone to reduce background noise. To members of the public, thank you for attending. You are in listen-only mode. If you have any technology questions, please use the chat feature in WebEx to communicate with the event host. Per the board's guidelines for public participation, we do not take public comment during the all-committee meeting today. We will take public comment at the board meeting on Thursday, October 19th, which will be conducted in person at the Omaha Douglas Civic Center and will begin at 5:00 p.m. The public may attend in person or remotely via WebEx events by going to OPPD.com. Joining me today in person are my fellow board members, Amanda Bogner, Mike Kavanaugh, Matt Core, Sarah Howard, Janice Mulhoff, Craig Moody, and Mary Spurgeon. We also have members of our executive leadership team, our general counsel, Steve Bruckner, with the Fraser Stryker Law Firm, and OPPD staff. Additionally, we currently have 21 attendees in the meeting, consisting of OPPD employees and members of the public. Today, we will hear the following committee reports: the governance report from Director Wagner, finance report from Director Spurgeon, customer and public engagement committee report from Director Howard, and the systems management and nuclear oversight committee report from Director Moody. Javier Fernandez, safety briefing.
Thank you, Chair Williams. I'm gonna ask Josh to do that for us briefly here for those of us who are in person at the huddle space.
Welcome, everyone. As we typically do, we'll start with a quick physical safety briefing. As we know, if there's any type of bad weather or evacuation purposes, we can evacuate out the building or evacuate to the stairwells where we'll hunker down. Looks like it's a beautiful fall day, so I don't think we need to worry about any of that. We typically tell everyone, if you're not feeling well, to stay home, get rest, and make sure you're staying up to date with those doctor's appointments. If you need any assistance, we're happy to get that assistance to you. Located directly outside the doors are some first aid equipment, fire suppression materials, as well as AEDs. So we have access to all of those. There's also security professionals located at the main desk, and I'm available in the building as well. So if anybody needs any help, please let us know. We'll get that to you as quickly as possible. We always want to make sure that we're aware of our environmental hazards. So be sure you're aware of any trips or falls, cracks, wires, that type of thing. Those typically will get you in the emergency room quicker than anything else. And then finally, in the event of any type of emergency in the building, please remember the run, hide, fight philosophy. And again, please refer to the security professionals for assistance, and we'll get you the help as best we can. Finally, within this physical security realm, we also want to remind everybody at the cybersecurity realm, we all work in pretty important digital environments, and please be aware of the pitfalls and the problems that may cause. Watch out for spam types of emails and make sure that we are deleting those, or for the OPPD professionals, we can hit the spam or the phishing button and notify our IT team. So with that, I'll turn it back over to President Fernandez and have a great meeting.
Thank you, Josh. And just as a reminder, 911, if any of us has to call, the address is 1919 Servant Drive, Omaha, Nebraska. That's the location of the meeting. Hope we never have to abuse it. So it's good to have it in mind. On the psychological safety front, I'm going to touch on healthy conflict. Briefly, it's about being intentional about dealing with conflict. Conflict happens, it occurs. We have conflicting views, conflicting opinions, and avoiding conflict is not a solution. It's not a good practice, and this is part of the psychological safety culture, is making sure that we're intentional about dealing with conflict and having healthy ways for us to discuss and work through conflict that ultimately results in respectful interactions with team members. This is something that we try to practice. It's hard, but it's something that we have to be intentional about finding ways to solve, deal with conflict in a healthy manner. The next slide on safety focus for October. Line of fire is a term we use at OPPD. It's not necessarily related to actual physical fire, although it could be. But it's defined as being in harm's way. It's something that we ask all of our employees whenever they're about to begin any physical work. Make sure that you have clear view about what objects could harm you if you're working on poles, on transformers, on towers, or even in generation plants. Making sure that not only you know what the job briefing is, but what could go wrong and what flying objects or fires that could affect you. And I think it's an important reminder for all of us who, when you're at home about to begin any job. Fall weather hazards, as the temperatures are starting to drop, we have a lot of freeze thaw. It's just a reminder that walking surfaces become very slippery with leaves and freezing, overnight freezing. So we're asking all of our employees, and I ask people here listening today, to be aware of fall weather hazards. And at the same time, it's that time of year when we're starting to turn our furnaces and space heaters at home and at work, etc. And it's very, very important for us to review and practice fire safety. We do that at OPPD, but it's also a good reminder for all of us to do this at home as we begin with more indoor heating and cooking and outdoor fires, and with all of that comes risk. So let's be aware of that. That concludes my safety briefing.
Thanks very much. First this morning, we have the governance committee. So report from Director Buckner.
All right, thank you very much. The governance committee met on October 12th, and we discussed several items that you see on the slide here. First item, CEO growth and effectiveness update. We had a closed session this morning as a follow-on to that. And then we also discussed the board work plan. So out of the governance or out of the workshop that we had earlier this fall, there were several items for the governance committee to take up. And so we took a pass through those, prioritize those items, establish some due dates for them. And you'll see that updated information on the review of board work plan later today. We also talked about the board operating principles. Another item that came out of the board workshop was to establish some operating principles. LRI, our consultant that facilitated the workshop, prepared those operating principles as a first pass for us. They are here on a half sheet paper in front of you, as well as on the back of your nameplate. So over the course of this next month, I'd like for everyone on the board to review those operating principles, identify if there's any tweaks that need to be made, and then we'll have the final version of those operating principles available to us on the back of our nameplate to refer to going forward. These are just, reminders of how we want to show up and participate here as board members, so that that we're meeting the intention of our governance principles and working really well together. The next slide, if you will, is the governance committee planning calendar. So we do have a couple SD monitoring reports coming up later this fall. And unless there are any questions about the governance pre-committee, that's it for me.
Great.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Next committee is the finance committee. Director Spurgeon.
Thank you, Chair Williams. We met on Friday, October 6th. Item 2 followed the safety briefing and is titled Preliminary Results of the Corporate Operating Plan and 5-Year Outlook. Just as plans have been made to address near-term generation needs, plans are being made to answer the financial needs of the district to enable us to serve our stakeholders. A high view and long-term outlook was presented, which reflected informed, prudent, conservative financial management that is in the best interests of our stakeholders and is really the hallmark of OPPD. Item 3 on this agenda was not addressed due to lack of time, so we'll see that item again in November. In like manner, items 4 and 5 were dispatched with pretty quickly. May we see the next slide, please? And one after that as well. Colleagues, this slide is to remind you of the timeline for presentation of the preliminary corporate operating plan for 2024. It will start with the Finance Committee on November 10th. And then you will see it at the committee meeting on November 16th. And then that preliminary corporate operating plan will be posted on OPPD.com for customers to review as well. Then in December, there will be a summary of changes between the preliminary and the final plan at the December Finance Pre-Committee meeting, again, very early in the month, December 1st. And so those changes will also be presented to all board members at the Directors Committee meeting on December 12th and in preparation for approval on December 14th. So this is just to illustrate the process of moving from the presentation of the preliminary corporate operating plan to the final 2024 corporate operating plan over the next 2 months. So going to be pretty full, but nicely spaced out, I think. Are there any questions? Seeing none, hearing none. Back to you, Chair Williams. Thank you.
Great. So moving along. Excellent. Next committee, Customer and Public Engagement Committee, Director Howard.
Okay, so the Customer and Public Engagement Committee met on October 9th, and we discuss three things: the Nebraska levy, Nebraska City levy project, rec sales, our renewable energy credit sales, and just very briefly on the Nebraska City levy upgrade project. We just got a really high level update of the stakeholder outreach efforts that they're doing and the project itself. So they're going to upgrade the existing levee and enhance protection for the critical generation and substation assets at the Nebraska City Station from floodwaters. And they expect to complete it in Q4 2026. I have all my notes here. And I cannot answer questions about that, but I'm certain Lisa can direct you. And then on rec sales, we've got Cliff here, but we just got a high level overview of OPPD's plan to resume the sale of renewable energy credits. These are environmental commodities that when retired allows an end user to claim that a portion of their energy consumption has come from a renewable resource. And the sales of RECs is consistent with SD7 and can be done under our current resolutions. And then this will be the committee that will keep an eye on rec sales and how that's going in the future. If you have any questions, Lisa, Cliff, and Tim are here for those. All right, hearing none, I'll pass it over to Lisa to give us an update on SB 13.
Thank you so much, Chair Bowman. Good morning. For those online, my name is Lisa Olson and I'm Vice President of Public Affairs at OPPD. I'm here to talk about SD 13, and many of you know where the passion lies with this particular monitoring report. But you also hear from a dear colleague that has been on this journey with me, and so I wanted to share this time with her as well. So let me start by saying the past year, and you've heard me say this every year, has been monumental. And many of you may remember when we started our stakeholder journey, we maybe had 1 or 2 projects in a couple of years. Wait until you see the list here. And we had to pare it way down so that it was just case studies, because otherwise we'd be here all morning and wanted to be efficient. So next slide, please. For the past few years, as I said, the volume and complexity and duration of our outreach and engagement have matured. And I'm really proud of that. We truly are leading the industry. In fact, we're leading in multiple ways. And I'll give you an example. We've even had a couple nonprofit organizations in Omaha here that reached out and said, can you come in and help coach us? Because we've heard such great things about your engagement. And we want to hear how you do it and how best to do that. That's new, Lori, so I'll take that one, okay? This work, along with the board's support and interest of our engagement efforts, have positioned us to accelerate and mature our outreach and engagement efforts, which in my opinion leads the industry. This year's efforts, which we'll discuss shortly, represent one more step in our outreach and engagement maturity path. We recognize the important place we're experiencing in our utilities, off the charts, and our communities need us as we do our outreach. So we're going to take the next 15 minutes and Director Moody, you remember sometimes this monitoring report was 60 pages. So we've really condensed it at your guys's and gals' comments. So with that being said, let's go to the next one, please. I first want to say thank you for the flexibility for SD 13 and the language. We have talked about how we needed that flexibility. And I know that this is broad, but every single one of our outreach efforts is totally different. And we put a master plan together for every single outreach effort that we do with our objectives. How do we measure it? At the end, how can we get better? And you'll see a lot of that as well. So with that being said, I'm not going to read through all of these, but I just wanted to say thank you to Lori and the team. Brooke Aiken was here, Kate Thomas from Public Affairs, but this is a district-wide and board outreach effort. And you're going to see many of these examples during the next few moments. So with that, Lori.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. I do appreciate going on that journey, at least like you said. I mentioned this in pre-committee and I'll say it again here. OPPD has been around for 77 years
And the stakeholder and community outreach department has been around for 7. And the first couple of years, we were really focused on the community outreach and focus. So I'm really proud of where OPPD is at today in that journey in 5 years and looking at the maturity model, how far we've come. So I do want to preface it with that. So thank you to everybody who's been a part of that journey. So with SD13, the first thing that we're asked to do is use an integrated, clear, and transparent process that provides meaningful ways for our customers to give feedback to us. And so over the last year, we've really had a broad range, right? From big awareness type of communication to more tailored things. So Aaron's going to click through them here, but you've seen things from community open houses to our community conversations, online public commenting forums. We've also had in-person and broad and live stream board meetings, right? So you can do either or. And from social media, we also have the large formal customer meeting, and we also have informal meetings. We have a lot of one-on-ones. We have the coffees with the CEO. And I do want to pause a minute too and say, when we talk about broad and also smaller, if you think about social media, you think of it as a broad type of medium, but we have the ability to geo-target. So we can go to zip codes to really hone in on impacted, and we can go to next door and even go down to circuits. So we do have that broad range. But what we do know that is what's meaningful is relative to the stakeholder and even the project. So that's something that we've learned. Next slide. We also know that we need to share context with customer owners around key decisions and continuously evaluate and improve our outreach and engagement processes. And so in a moment, like Lisa said, I'm going to talk about 5 case studies that really kind of illustrate our approach and to how we approach the outreach and then also continuous improvement. But first I want to just talk a little bit about how we do it. I know we said we had the broad range, but we have things like OPPD Community Connect that uses written words. We have videos, we have online forums. And what's really cool about that is when the customers weigh in, they can see other perspectives. So it's not just this one-way dialogue. They can really see this holistic picture of how all of our customers feel about these key decisions and projects. We also share through written stories, whether it's OPPD The Wire or OPPD.com or outlets. But again, we have these big picture to make sure that there's this awareness. And then we also have more face-to-face events or digital where we hone in, and the more detailed things, like whether it's direct mail or posters in communities. And I'll speak to that when I talk about Cast to Sarpy. So before we get into the case studies, I just want to be able to start it with this short video.
This minute, we're going to make sure that they can hear it.
You bet. No worries.
While we're going and bringing that up, I want to thank Kate Thomas in Corporate Marketing and Communications for the campaign that they put together during the near term and Power with Purpose. It has really resonated with the community, and we've had a lot of comments of people saying how progressive they really felt that the communication has been. So thank you, Kate.
The future will be equal parts science and magic. And at OPPD, we're working on both. Because the magic of the future isn't going to come without the hard work of the present. That's why we're not just envisioning the future, we're acting, innovating, and laying the groundwork for all the amazing things on the horizon. Our mission is to provide our communities with the perfectly powered future they deserve. That means preparing today to power things that haven't even been invented yet. Things you won't believe. And things our grandkids won't understand how we ever lived without. Omaha Public Power District. Illuminate our future.
That was all done local here with our own employees and customers.
Okay, so that spot is a nice summary of our efforts to raise awareness around Future to 2050 with that Illuminate the Future campaign. Think about it, when you talk about engagement, sometimes with outreach, there's a finite beginning and end, right, with a project. This is a 27-year long engagement. So think about that. Like how do we make sure that we keep this top of mind? How do we inspire and engage? Some of the people that will be around in 2050, our customers, they aren't even born yet. Some of them are in high school and middle school. So the messaging to them and inspiring them looks a lot different than some of our current customers. And so our goal is to increase awareness among our customers and our stakeholders about our vision, and that helps guide the work. So when you think about this campaign in general, what we did is we started in Q4 last year, and we really just talked to local leaders, and we talked to organizations, and we talked to the mayor's office and the chamber, and we wanted to share the vision. We were excited about it. And we also wanted to find out from them, like, yeah, thumbs up, we good, we aligned, and they were aligned around what we're doing. They're very supportive of it. So once we got that in Q1, we then launched that awareness campaign to really get feedback from the community about how they felt about that vision. And then with that, then after the awareness campaign, what we did is we went out there, like I said, got the feedback. And from the feedback, we started looking at it and we realized, you know what? Stakeholders were vocal, right? There were some opponents on both sides. Not everybody was crazy. Some people are in one camp, some are in another. But once you start to really have this awareness and have these discussions, then people become supportive. You've heard Lisa say this before, and I know I've said it. When this outreach happens, people may not be extremely happy with the final decision, but if they understand the why behind it, that is huge. So what we've learned is that we're making slow and steady progress, but we also still have to make sure that we're tenacious because again, this is 27 years and we can't keep running this campaign every year for 27 years, right? We have to be agile, we have to change, we have to figure out what that message is. So we're making slow and steady progress, but again, we have to make sure that the content is simple. So that leads us then to the near-term generation. So the reason that we talk about our vision is because that helps us set context around these huge historic decisions that you guys have to make, right? So through that outreach, we began talking about the load, last December with State of the Utility. We really kind of started setting the stage, right? Like, what does that look like? We need to make sure people understand the why. And so then in April, that's when you saw that Illuminate Our Future campaign begin. And that really started talking about the growth. We really wanted to know what people felt about it and driving them to OPPD Community Connect. And then in May, when the formal resolution was passed, then we went ahead and the new generation page was set up on OPPD Community Connect. And it really allowed that opportunity for public comment. And overall, what we did understand, like I said, is that some of the opponents were vocal, but they do understand the why, and that's when they're very supportive of us. What we learned with this type of stuff is the issues are complex, and so we need to make sure that our messages are very simple and that we're making sure that people are understanding and with that, then being able to address any concerns that they have around that. So speaking of generation, that takes us to Platteview Solar, which is a great case study on this. We know that solar is going to play a very important role for us moving forward. And utility scale solar is new to our customers and it's new to us. And guess what? New stuff and change, it's scary, right? And you have to sometimes start by just listening. And so that's what we did. It was a great learning opportunity for us. Our objective was to raise awareness around what we were doing, but then also strengthen the relationships in that community, engage leaders, understand what any of the concerns were. And when we did, and you really think about the history of that area, there were some things that they have legitimate concerns out there. And they were bringing those concerns to this table and saying, wait a minute, we've already been burned once. Help me understand how this isn't going to happen to us again. And when you understand that, and you can work with the communities, so we learned that we have to be proactive in our understanding. Leadership matters. We need that feedback. And then when you have all that, you build trust. And I know Lisa shared this story before, but I'm really a shout out to government affairs and everybody involved and the solar team and you name it. But at the time when we were all jammed in the county fair building and we're all in front of everybody, one of the commissioners actually pointed to the team and said, OPPD, we trust you. And that's really what the end game is, right? Like if we're doing it right, we're engaging, we're educating, we're addressing all their concerns, then we want them to trust that we're doing the right thing, that we're not in it to harm anybody, and we want to make sure that everybody's comfortable with what we're doing. You can move on, Aaron. So then we have North Omaha Station Extension. So Jamie was here a few weeks ago and she talked more at a tactical level around the things that we've done and what everybody's doing in each of the areas. But again, this was all hands on deck, from public affairs to customer service, human capital, environmental, you name it, it was all hands on deck. But again, it was about strengthening those relationships and the active listening. So what we found is that active listening is what really drove our work. So we had that community facilitated conversation. If you remember, the community conversation happened in February. And we brought people to the table. And let's face it, we're an organization mainly of engineers and detailed people, and we just want to tell everybody everything. And that's great. But if the message is missing the mark and not addressing what customers are concerned about, so we said, you know what, time out. We need to sit back and listen. And so by doing that, that did drive the work. And we found that when we did talk to people about the North Omaha extension, yes, there were some people that had concerns. And then when they understood the why, they were like, we're good. But what was interesting is that proactive listening to the community is we started hearing other things. Like, you know what, I'm good with this decision, but you know what? We need help with low income and EAP. Or what are you doing to help with the workforce and economic development in this area? And then our team got bigger and bigger and bigger. And so we knew that what we learned in all of this is, yes, we have to have the active listening. Yes, we have to address, but we also have to build a cadence. We're always out in our communities. They see us, right, with the parades and the events, and we have those relationships. But what we found through this process is we need to be better about also building a cadence, making sure that we're consistently going back. And that was a great takeaway from Omaha Station. And and with that outreach, we are now duplicating that same type of outreach in York County. So the last case study I'm going to speak to is Casta Sarpy Transmission Project. And so with this, what we wanted customers to do is to really help us understand and give us insights around selecting a route. So again, we took the model that we've been using. How do we engage local leaders, right, to be able to understand around the project and to be able to communicate that. What we did different here too that was interesting that we're learning is we're engaging employees more on the front end. Yes, we've always told all employees, but we really honed in. So on this one, what we did is, if you think about, I'm going to set the stage and tell you the story about as far as this Casta Sarpy line. It's a 23-mile line, right? Has to be built from Cass County to Turtle Creek. And so we had this blank slate, and we can take many routes to connect these two and build this line. And so what we did is we said, okay, let's talk to the local leaders. Let's call in the employees that live in Cass and Sarpy and say, talk to us. Like, is there any blind spots? Is there anything we need to know? What are you hearing, when you're out at night and talking to friends and family? And interestingly enough, the aha for us in this one was solar developers had been out for years already talking in this area. And so they were like, they think you're building this line solely for solar. And we're like, but we're not. We're building it no matter the generation, we need it. But guess what? That was a huge insight for us to know and to be able to speak to and to remind them of powering the future and near-term generation and all those good things. And then also what we found out is the one thing that's consistent is everybody wants to be heard, and they want to have that respect and know that we're listening, and that either how we're using the feedback. And another aha for us is why we're not using it. People are like, that's great that you're taking the feedback and using it, but when it's not, also explain that. But then in Casta Sarpy, the one thing that was unique is it's very different when you go there versus Metro Omaha. So what we did find is there's no Omaha World Herald, but there's the Casgram. It's perfect for that area. So we ended up using that, and it really got the word out. It's not flashy, it's not crazy, but guess what? It's how they get their news. Also, sometimes what was old is new again. We just went into the community and understanding that they have coffee before they go out to harvest, or they're at the restaurant, and that's where all the big key conversations happen. So we went out and did posters in the communities, and we really reached out to everybody. So again, it's just engaging the employees, the leaders, and also making sure that we are using unique tactics to be able to make sure that everybody's at the table and that we didn't skip a beat. So I will leave it there and turn it back over to Lisa.
A lot of great work. And there's story after story after story. As Javier says, go make the invisible visible. And that's what we've been trying to do to bring this to life. It also then parlays into the customer satisfaction and SD5. And we're going to be doing some metrics around that as well for the next monitoring report. So I will pass it back over to you, Chair Howard, for your recommendation.
Thank you, Lisa. So the Customer and Public Engagement Committee has reviewed the monitoring report and accepted it, and we found it to be sufficiently in compliance. We're happy to, field any questions you have. Lisa's happy to field any questions you have. But a lot of work has been done around outreach and stakeholder engagement. And I think we've seen some changes to the way they're reporting to us about it, right? Instead of just saying, oh, we had this many meetings. It's more about, we looked at this project and really strategically met the stakeholder needs for this area. And so we're happy to get any feedback as well about how we're reporting so that we can make sure that we're meeting the boards well.
So I have a question, but I really like this format, how you shared the context, what you learned, how you applied it. I think that's really helpful for us to see your process and how you work through the process. And so I really appreciate this. And again, thank you for all your work in the communities and all the outreach that you do. I know it's difficult at times and challenging, but
well, many of you have been on the front lines with us right there in those meetings. So thank you for that.
I'll just echo Director Mulhoff's observations. I like what we learned, how we're applying it, and having been to a couple of the things or more involved in some of those 5 major initiatives that you've dealt with. It's just really apparent that you are flexible, that you are responding to people and being very open to people. And I commend you for really fine work. Thank you.
I was also gonna just state that I really like the format of this report in particular and really connecting the dots, making that unseen scene, but also tying it to the Vision 2050 and how we're going to use this strategic directive to bring our entire community along on that journey. I appreciate the case study nature of this. It really helps to dig in and see the layers that go into this and how you've translated the policy words into the actions of your group. Thank you.
So if I can, and thank you for the connection here on the Power in the Future 2050. Now that we're talking about what has been accomplished and how do we build this virtuous circle where the board gives us strategic directives, we have a vision of 2050. What are we learning through the work that we do and continue to envision that 2050 future? And are there any learnings that can come back into the SD and eventually for the board to consider revisions or modifications in the future state? I'm not suggesting I don't have anything today, but of course that'll be the board's prerogative. Really important, I think, for me to connect this work with Power in the Future 2050, and there are many milestones that we have envisioned for 2030, 2040, 2050. I will summarize them as in a continuum between a centralized and a decentralized utility. It's really not a black and white, but certainly what I am seeing from OPPD as we move into this vision for Power in the Future 2050 is less centralized utility. A lot more reliance on a partnership and two-way communication with all of those who we serve and stakeholders. It's a future where you have customer freedom and cleaner world and perfect power that play really well with the utility, but that necessitates a different type of interaction with our customers. So AMI, for example, is a great example. What are we doing with the AMI ecosystem and what that will enable us to do with customers, not only for customer satisfaction, but also for customer generation, demand side management, energy efficiency. the way we're gonna be connecting with customers in that realm is gonna be incredibly important. And for stakeholder outreach will become even more important. How do we deploy? How do we continuously talk about the benefits of OPPD and the need that we have for customers to work with us in that realm? 27 years will go by really quick. And so how do we continue to use these SD and our stakeholder outreach to make sure that we have this vision of 2050 become a reality? So I'm just connecting those dots in here, and I'd be happy to talk a little bit more in detail if you want on how do we see this vision of 2050 coming to life in the realm of stakeholder engagement.
And with customers that aren't even customers yet, right?
Yep.
Use right. I mean,
One other comment. So how do we tie this ST13 back to customer satisfaction and engagement? Are there questions on the customer satisfaction survey that specifically say, how have you engaged with OPPD? Was that positive? What are your takeaways from that? So when we're doing our customer satisfaction surveys, does that tie back to this SD13 and could that be at some point included in this as a way to evaluate the effectiveness of this program?
must be looking into what the team's been talking about. Back when we were at
My
Energy
crystal ball.
Plaza, was that we had the dashboard that was up on the screen, and it goes back to, do our customers trust us? Are we engaged in the community? And customer satisfaction. And so we're working on those measurements to put that, we talk about it in SD5, but incorporating that in this particular area.
I think that's a good way to really, concretely measure how effective you are is by asking your customers, okay, did you engage with OPPD on what platform? And if that platform worked or didn't, or would you like a different platform?
And sometimes those measurements are, I've heard Heather speak about this before too. Some of them are very transactional, right? I mean, my service often.
Sure.
How did we do in that process? And then some of them are relational. And when it gets to stakeholder outreach, it was like, especially with some of this exit surveys. Did you feel like all your concerns were addressed today? Did you feel like you were heard? How did you feel about the process? So yeah, there are a number of measurements, but you're right, like maybe how we look at how that it impacts that larger.
Other questions or comments?
Thank you.
So much. Thank you, Lord.
Thank you. You're welcome.
We are done for CPE.
Next up is the Systems Management and Nuclear Oversight Committee, Director Moody.
Chair Williams. Okay, before we get into SD7, Cliff, let's talk a little bit about the committee's meeting on October 4th. Sorry, a second. There they are. So a couple things to point out here, colleagues, SD4 in particular. So the committee got a preview of some potential refinements to SD4. And so a couple things here. One is process. We anticipate that these recommendations for refinements to SD4 will come to the full board in November for a potential vote in December. I think it's fair to say that the committee really liked what they saw. Really appreciated the work that's gone into thinking about what the focus should be of SD4. And I'll just draw a couple things to your attention, and then I would encourage those of you that are not on that committee to hop into Diligent, take a look at the slides and see if there's anything that you'd like to inquire about before November. There are a couple key metrics that we're not going to touch, but one of the key ones will be around generation and making some really key modifications to what we're tracking there in terms of how we measure progress and success, and then also a little bit on distribution. So I'm not going to walk through them in detail. It was a really good report. And again, I think the committee really appreciated having an opportunity to get sort of that first look at it, ask some good questions, and I'll just say that I'm excited to bring these revisions to the full board for discussion. Okay, also, you see SD7 up there, so we will get a monitor report here in a moment. But before we do that, quick update on the revision process. So you all know that we've been talking over time about potential revisions to SD7. And so Mr. Fleener talked a little bit about what that might look like, when it might happen. I was struck by the amount be necessary in order for us to sort of be ready for some of those revisions. So he's going to be bringing a more detailed work plan that outlines the tasks, the prerequisites needed, the development of other meaningful metrics, operational goals, initiatives that will support that revision in December. So we're going to give them a little space to get through corporate operating plan in November, and then in December we will get a really good look into all that's needed in order for us to be ready to start to consider what some revisions to SD7 might look like. So work is underway. Again, I was impressed by the level of thought that needs to go into us having something that we can look at, point to, and have confidence in. I'll speak for myself and say that I don't want to make any changes to SD7 just because it feels good. I think we need to ground it in what the reality is, and that's a big part of what's going on. And then the last thing I'll draw your attention to on the committee meeting agenda there is item number 5. The committee received a report on the Grand Prairie Wind Facility, which I think, as all of you know, is a 400 megawatt wind facility located near O'Neill, Nebraska. It's owned and operated by a third party. The update included information on the facility's recent operational performance and near-term energy production expectations. So I'll leave it at that. If you've got any detailed questions, you can speak with Mr. Underwood about it, but it was just kind of a quick update. Okay, that's the chair's report. Any quick questions before we move on to SD7? All right, here we go.
All right, thank you, Director Moody. For those online, my name is Cliff Fleener. I'm Vice President of Sustainability and Environmental Affairs for OPPD. It's my pleasure to deliver the SD7 monitoring report for the 2022 year. Before I begin, I want to start by thanking Tim McAreevy and Lisa Olson for their contributions for their team to this report. A lot of good data, a lot of good work from their teams have been integrated into this report. My hardworking director, Jeremy Bowers, and the rest of my team, they were able to condense and crystallize this report down to its shortest on record at 12 pages. So we're off to an excellent start. Next slide. I think this is a particularly impactful PowerPoint. It really shows us where we've been. It's been used for the last 2 SDs. I think it's really important for a couple of reasons. One, I think it shows the passion and the attention that the board has paid to environmental and sustainability issues, which I think is particularly important. I also think that the revision in 2019 targeting our net zero carbon goal is also particularly important. It is, as I've mentioned before, it is our lodestar. It is a target that we are aiming for to move forward to try to achieve. And as Director Moody mentioned, as future revisions are considered, what I hope to do with consideration and support of the board is to bring opportunities to make more of a bottom-up effort to integrate sustainability across our platform so that we can leverage the talent and expertise of the guys and gals on the floor, the folks in the bucket trucks, really bring us a sustainable organization as a whole to leverage and make a continuous improvement effort that'll keep moving us in the right direction, inspired not just by our net zero goal, but also by Powering the Future 2050. Next slide, please. As everyone may know, there are 7 components to SD7. Rather than read through all of them here, I've got a separate slide that addresses each section and then provides some evidence of performance in 2022, some ideas and some thoughts about work that's been done in 2023, and where possible, some changes that I would suggest and recommend that would be made in how we deliver these reports in the future. Next slide, please. Our first item is to operate in an environmentally responsible manner and strive for continuous improvement of our environmental performance. As you can see here, we've got listed the status of our vehicle fleet, with over 45% of them being either electric, hybrid, or flex fuel. We've got 9 plug-in bucket trucks, and we have a robust sustainability program. A couple of points to point out is our gallons of oil recycled has dropped to 41,000 gallons. That's due largely to some process changes,
allowed us to reuse a number of oil in 2022, reducing the amount that needed to be recycled. And we had quite a surge in batteries being recycled in 22 as well, which is part of an initiative to remove batteries and replace them at a number of substations. What I'd like to see going in the future is to have an individual carbon goal linked to our fleet and fleet improvement and modernization that we would measure over multiple years as one example. We would also apply recycling goals and figure out carbon goals along with that as one of the changes that I would suggest in the future as we move forward. Next slide, please. Conduct all operations in a manner that strives for the goal of net zero carbon production by 2050. 36.44% of our total portfolio was renewable in 2022, as is mentioned, near-term generation. 90% of the new energy that will be sourced will be renewable, and that was based on price primarily. On some of the many great projects that are done by Tim's group around demand side management, we have a total offset of 191 megawatts of design side management, which gives us a lot of additional flexibility in how to source that power. And we've saved over 75,000 tons of CO2 through a variety of energy efficiency programs, again, led in the community by our customer services team. Overall scope 1 emissions are down 30% from our 2013 baseline. I think an excellent result overall. As we move forward and begin to develop additional operational goals, we'll have additional targets and processes baked into future SD7 reports. Thank you. Next slide, please. Next, conduct its business in a manner that meets all environmental regulatory standards and go beyond compliance where practicable. This is one of the things that's always impressed me about OPPD. The regulatory environment that we operate in is both complex and quite comprehensive. And I have to say that what really impressed me about my team, even before I came, was the fantastic compliance record. And the amount of work that goes into maintaining that compliance record is nothing less than remarkable. It's not just my team, but it's Troy's team, the operations team. It really is a team effort, and to do it well requires a lot of expertise and a lot of time. And I just wanted to express my gratitude to everyone that helps us achieve that goal. We've had no violations for environmental permits resulting in fines or enforcement actions in 2022. We have a very robust internal audit program that really works like a partnership with us and the group, and I really value that contribution and that cooperation. And we continue to improve our PCB program, including a more comprehensive review of all PCBs across our footprint. And we're working on efforts to speed and reduce the number of PCB containing transfers across our service area. Now, in terms of going beyond compliance where practical, to me, that means sustainability. That means energy efficiency and natural resource. I had the very distinct pleasure of visiting all of our Prairie in Progress locations. That wonderful flower was actually taken, that shot was actually taken on one of the trips. Really remarkable asset to the community, helps to improve stormwater. It's an amazing asset, I think, for our organization. We have our avian protection program, which is updated and completed in 2022, as so many of us have seen the Raptor purchase and so at North Omaha. And then we have a growing sustainability program. I'm delighted to indicate that I've hired a sustainability program manager, a sustainability coordinator. Coordinator will work mostly with the sites. The program manager will work across the district. And then we will have our data analytics manager join us in November. So our program is beginning. I think we're off to a good start, and I'm looking forward to building and spinning the flywheel a little bit faster as we begin producing what I hope will be a number of impactful projects and goals. Next slide, please. This is just amazing, the amount of material and action and communication that goes on across the district. I have to say that it is absolutely remarkable. And there's so much good information that's out there that's available at fingertips. I hope working closely with Lisa's team over time, as we build our sustainability report, I think we'll make an even better and more focused communications program and combine it with some of the data and supporting goals that we'll be developing. We do monitor performance in 2022. Overall, OPPD visits were down 7% in 23 due to larger storms in 21, 22. Not surprisingly, those storm events drive a lot of attention. Slight increase in attention to our environmental tab, and tab spikes were largely due in January to March due to the North Omaha station outreach, which I think was a masterclass in communication. I really have to commend Lisa and her team for that. Just absolutely fantastic. The degree of cooperation and communication across the board was really magnificent. Next slide, please. Engage customers and stakeholders to promote energy conservation and efficiency and minimize environmental impact. We saw customer generation start to slow a little bit in 2023, starting with a good solid spike in 21. think that's largely attributable to the increase in interest rates that so many of these projects are financed. Also, I think a lot of the early adopters have probably joined us. We look forward to seeing that continue and as grant programs and other things become available to continue to grow that over together. Tim's team leads the Greener Together program, which I think is a really exciting program that really gives our customers a chance to direct money and resources to key projects. And they've got a number, I think, of very impactful ones. We've got 2 completed in 2022, our Green Orchard and the Native Grasses effort, a chance to model proper land management and the growing of crops, Whispering Roots and Habitat for Humanity efforts around solar. 2 are in progress, and then 2 on deck are Florence Futures and No More Empty Pots. Both target alternative energy generation, infrastructure upgrades in the North Omaha area, to name a few. And then our energy education program, Eric Bensala. I haven't met that gentleman yet. I hope to do it soon, but I think he's so charismatic. I know he's seen him in a lot of schools with his signature orange bow tie. You can't not appreciate what he's doing. And he continues to continue substantial outreach, reaching more teachers, more educations, and more students across our footprint. Next slide, please. Advocate and educate local, state, and federal governments to protect and promote OPPD's environmental impact. Through 2022, extensive engagement from our public affairs team across state, local, national governments. We participated in the Mid-Continent Clean Hydrogen Hub. We're not selected, but I suspect we're going to continue to work for other opportunities in that area. Various planning conferences and the Nebraska Power Association, where we contributed both speakers and participants from within the organization, provided climate testimony to the Climate Action Grant Awards, and of course our efforts in Solus and Bright projects, putting solar fields on top of landfills, which is, I think, is particularly good use for that sort of difficult to utilize land. And of course, engaged with various funding opportunities, a dedicated grant writer within Lisa's team that always seeking out opportunities to harvest money for the benefit of OPPD and for our customer owners. And a fantastic money shot of Directors William and Omaha at the Platteville Solar location. Next, please. By year end 2027, achieve approximately a 3.5 million ton annual reduction in CO2 emissions at the North Omaha Station site, relative to OPPD's 2013 benchmark of 3.9 million tons at the station. This does not even begin to give justice to the amount of work and effort that goes into this transition, but we wanted to take some time just to explain where we're. Green means completed, orange is on pace, which right now is transmission service upgrades, and the SPP generation interconnection process, and then yellow is upcoming. You can see the arrow where we're currently on. Based on the current operations and efforts, we remain on track to transition North Omaha by the close of 2026. Next slide, please. Wanted to give everyone a little taste of some of the things that we're going to be looking for as we move forward towards making a more cleaner world. Number of things we've done so far this year in the area of sustainability, risk management, and compliance systems. In addition to our new hires, we're launching our environmental and our sustainability playbooks. This will be the new environmental management system and sustainability system that we will use at OPPD. I look forward to sharing that with board members and an individual basis starting in November and December. It's going to be our guidepost. It's going to, I hope, help to unlock a lot of the experience and talent at the grassroots level within our company, forming green teams across our footprint to begin working on sustainability and energy conservation efforts. We're also bringing in our OPPD, will be our OPPD communication system. It's essentially a software platform. It allows us to streamline our compliance efforts so that we can communicate more effectively internally, also manage corrective actions around both auditing and about inspections so that we can free up more of the team's focus on sustainability efforts and working on energy and resource conservation across the footprint. How we look at the program or how I evaluate our performance, I like to use the United Nations Global Compact Sustainable Stages model. I think right now we're heavily weighted on compliance, a lot of compliance projects, but I think we have 2 particularly important items in purpose driven, and I'll explain what those are in a moment. Compliance, it's all tied about what things you have to do to make legal requirements. The second option is resource optimization. That's really about energy efficiency and carbon reductions based on efficiency improvements. Market differentiation is the unique aspects of a program that set us apart from other utilities. Our environmental commodity sales is a classic example of that, the ability to self-fund a lot of these improvements. And then purpose driven. I think we've got 2 components that meet that definition. One is our net zero 2050 goal, and our other is powering the future 2050, which is really, I think they both work as the net zero target is our goal we move for. Powering future 2050 is really the bumper, so the guideline that helps guide us in the right direction towards that. And I look forward to integrating more of the purpose-driven efforts around public powering the future 2050 across our footprint and within our program as a whole. And with that, next slide, please. Based upon this recommendation is presented, turn it over to Director Moody for his comments on the sufficiency of this report.
Thank you, Cliff. Much appreciated. Again, the committee did review, provided a few comments on the content of the report, and then on the recommendation that you see in front of you. I'll just highlight a couple things before I open it up. Going through the report, I pulled out a few things that I think are important. The 30% reduction in scope 1 emissions, like that's really where the bang is, right? And so I think that's something important that we don't want to lose sight of. The other thing, Cliff, you talked about some of your forthcoming hires, but the fact that this is your first ST7 report, the fact that we have an executive level person working on this, I think is an important milestone that we've reached. And it didn't show up in here, but I don't want to minimize that. And then the other thing that struck me is the growth of customer-owned generation. That's a hockey stick graph, and that's growing really fast. So I'm excited that we've been able to continue to make that happen. I'll pause there. Colleagues from the committee, anything else that you want to highlight, call out, or certainly questions for others on the committee those that weren't on the committee.
I'll just highlight that I really like the framework for this report as well. So taking cues, how we're, it's not necessarily about the page count, but it's about connecting the dots, right? It's not just activities, but it's outcomes. And I appreciate that focus here as you pieced apart the 7 different elements of SD7. I do have a question on, it's number 9 on my slide deck, which isn't helpful here. If we can go back to the slide with a picture of Director Molhoff and Director Williams.
Well, that's the money shot, yes.
Money shot. The very last bullet line is talking about engaging with various funding opportunities. And we have PACE loan program listed as the very last thing there. Can you help articulate how OPPD engages with the PACE loan program? And I'm just wondering if it's the same PACE loan program that I'm familiar with.
Okay. I'm going to have to see if Jeremy can help me out with
Yes,
the details on that one.
Yeah, I can speak from here if that's okay. I think the microphone probably picks it up.
Microphone.
But it's the camera.
Yeah. No, I'll wait. Jeremy Bowers, Director of Environmental and Regulatory Affairs. Yeah, to answer your question, I believe it is the same program. I know there's several facets underneath that. I did get an update actually just yesterday from that team. It was, when we say engage there, it means there's a host of programs out there that we're evaluating, as you all know. Our finance team took a really hard look at that, ultimately decided that it wasn't favorable for the district to pursue. That's an update we just got here within the last week. Just yesterday, I talked with Chris and she connected with the finance team on that. And so it was part of the myriad of things we're evaluating, but that particular opportunity wasn't favorable for us. I think it had particular, the reason was the interest rates and our other opportunities.
So for clarity, Property Assess Clean Energy, is that the program we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
And we're going to be working with Chair Howard for our next committee meeting to give an overview of all the grants and where we're at on those, which then we'll share with the rest of the board.
Sure.
I'm good.
Thank you. Others?
I'll just take one more then, if no one else has anything. Obviously disappointed that the hydrogen hub proposal wasn't accepted by DOE. I'm wondering will we receive feedback from them about what could have strengthened our proposal that we can consider in the future?
The answer is we've asked for that,
Yes.
but they haven't clarified yet of how they're going to do that for us.
Okay, sounds good. Anyone else? Yep.
Yeah, so I appreciate the format of the report, reporting on all aspects of the organization. Again, that's great and definitely critical to the success of the modern report for this specific SD. So wonderful. I think your phrase was to bring us to a sustainable organization as a whole. Great, love to hear that. Great framing on this SD. I really appreciate the specifics on the timeline for North Omaha Station, according to the language is included for the metrics, and seeing the graphic with the projection on the GIA and the steps that will follow. Appreciate that clarification. I know that's something that, as you mentioned, was a significant point of community outreach. And so I know that people are very interested to see that we complete that successfully in the future. I've expressed a lot of feelings in the past about distributed energy resources and AMI, and I agree with the point Javier made earlier about the desire to prepare for a less exceptionally centralized utility structure and to be more engaged with two-way communication with our customers, residential, commercial, industrial, specifically in this area. And so those technologies advancing is really important to me. I'm glad to see that we are tracking that on the particularly the net meter and area. I feel like, yes, financing has a huge lever over how much of that is happening, and I'm curious to see where that goes in the future. I think there were some follow-on slides at the end that were available both in the web version and in Diligent that highlighted some additional information, and I'm not sure if they're available here, but one of them, yeah, in the appendix. Okay. Yep. A couple slides forward, I guess there's one that highlights specifically the advanced feasibility studies. And under the advanced feasibility studies, I know that was something that followed on after the decarbonization report was finalized at the end of 2021. And there was a line here that references the way in which we are anticipating additional work in that area. And I think it highlights that we are not currently projecting a study on distributed energy resource potential in the 2024 corporate operating plan. Is that correct? I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly where we're at on things.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, and so that is something like a value of solar study and something like a hosting capacity analysis. Is that the type of study we would be anticipating in the future related to demand side resources?
I'm going to have to defer to Brad's team or to Jeremy.
Yeah, so Director Williams, I'll take that just a little bit. So around the demand side management potentiality study, Brad Underwood and I had collaborated on that and agreed that we wanted to focus, because those efforts are so intensive and the market has developed and matured. We mutually agreed that we wanted to keep the team's focus on actually developing demand side management products and gaining adoption of customers for additional customers of programs, products, and services we already have out there. Thought that would be a more effective use of resources. In terms of distributed energy resources, we don't have a widespread study planned at this point, but it's a constant area of collaboration between our two groups around merging the degree of customer initiated interest in distributed energy and the role that it plays or has the opportunity to play around near-term resourcing and for utility scale, both placement and size.
Okay. To add to that, and I fully agree with that. I think the other piece is we have a few game-changing initiatives coming our way, and we have, again, I mentioned AMI ecosystem and the advent of aggregators. And so conducting a potentiality study under the current framework proved to be less relevant than waiting until we have, really the new framework. And to Tim's point, we have a lot to accomplish. We can hit the ground running. So we're gonna shift and really start getting into deploying demand side management resources, not wait for the potentiality study to be. That will come, I think, once we have the new framework, then we can figure out how else can we engage. But very clearly, I mean, this is something that it's in SD9 we have 32 megawatts of demand side management to achieve there's no time to waste. We're gonna go and dedicate our resources to.
Great. Appreciate that. And again, yeah, for me, there is no such thing as too much focus on AMI and accelerating that to facilitate DERs, and I'll leave it there for now. So yeah, I appreciate that. There were some slides that referenced the demand response and energy efficiency and metrics there. Very happy to see that. I think those are great things to measure. There's not a metric specifically included in SD7, and I'm not sure if that is part of a potential considered future update to policy language, because there were specific numbers reflected here. And so again, glad to see it, glad to know we're tracking it. Similar to the distributed energy resources, we don't have a metric in that area, but I'm curious if the way that we're tracking it now anticipates including any type of metric in the future. And I don't necessarily need an answer if there's not one available, because I know future policy update discussion is coming, but because we have specific numbers in this area, does that mean it is something that we could develop a metric around?
It's something we certainly look at. We want to look at a whole suite of metrics that we can evaluate moving forward. The hope that I would have with the board's concurrence is that we can make SD7 a little bit more flexible so that we can develop metrics. And we hope to develop and provide a number of them across the organization and external to measure our carbon impact and efficiency impact going forward.
Great. Appreciate all of that. From the slide that showed the emissions reductions, there's a large, I don't know the number on this one, the large pie chart that shows mostly orange. It reflects the scope 1 emissions and the reduction since 2013. I think it's important to highlight that reflects that something like 99.9% of our scope 1 emissions are from stationary combustion. And again, to my point earlier, I'm glad that we are tracking all of the other aspects of sustainability and environmental sensitivity across the organization. But I do think it is important that remember that in the area of emissions reductions, carbon emissions reductions, there is one exceptionally overwhelming portion of our total profile. That is a huge majority of where the work that we will do in the future needs to be occurring. We reflect a 30% reduction since 2013, and I appreciate that. I guess I would say that my understanding is a majority of the reduction that has occurred since 2013 was prior to the policy update in 2019, and based on decisions that occurred prior to 2019 as well. So when we look at the ongoing efforts toward being the long-term objective, all of that happened prior to essential strategy language. So while it's good to track where we are from 2013, I guess I just want to make sure we recognize that 30% was almost entirely before the net zero objective was established. And so, I want to make sure that we're looking forward to where we will be in alignment with the language around net zero by 2050. A couple things have occurred since 2019 that I think are relevant. One, the board approved Power with Purpose, and there are now some years of experience relative to the assets and how those have moved forward. Both of the gas assets are moving forward, and I understand the need for those for the critical capacity services to meet our customers' demands. But we now have taken additional action based on the board-approved focus on the renewable energy resources, and 81 out of the listed 600 megawatts of solar are being contracted, but we have moved to a different resolution. So in looking since 2019, when that was approved, to where we are now, how have we done on resources that will be aligned with the long-term objective? I think there is room for improvement in that area. And I know that we have a near-term generation resolution that estimates 90% of the future energy will come from non-emitting resources. I am aware of that. But in a review of where we have been over the recent years with the policy language that we have, I do think it's important to remember what has happened already to the time where we are now. Related to the near-term generation assets, we have scheduled capacity from fossil generating assets. And to my understanding, and I think I've mentioned this before, these assets are currently planned to have unabated carbon emissions. And if I'm mistaken about that, feel free to have anyone correct me on that. But operating combustion turbines on natural gas does imply emissions. And so since those resources will be here until and after 2050, I'm interested in how the planning to make those resources aligned with the language of the policy is going. You can swap the fuel source to a non-emitting fuel source in the turbine. You can capture on the stack. You can direct air capture later. You could early decommission resources. All of those would be aligned with 2050. But my understanding at the time of the discussion about the near-term generation planning, none of those have been specified yet. And I'm not sure if there is any additional language about how do we anticipate the near-term generation resources will be compliant in the future. And the reason I ask is that the decisions we make now in writing specs for the hardware that we will acquire does have big implications about what will be available in the future. If we purchase turbines that are not compatible with non-emitting fuel sources, that is no longer an option to achieve the outcomes by 2050. And that means we will have future additional work that will need to be undertaken. But I don't think that we have clearly quantified what that will imply for us. And so this is the area where I have the most concern, is that we are making decisions now that will have implications by the end of the timeline. Although it is 27 years in the future, we are making decisions now that will either require additional effort in the future or imply things about our ability to be fully compliant with the language as written now. And so I guess that's my primary area of interest in determining, are we sufficiently compliant with the language in the policy now, is that we are making resource planning decisions that do not currently include specificity on how they will be compliant. I feel like I do trust the team that we will be compliant, but I am uncertain how that will occur. And so language about being sufficiently compliant is a challenge to me, because we have undertaken a significant amount of resource planning and it implies a huge amount of future work, but I do not have clarity on how these resources will actually be sufficiently or completely compliant with the language that we currently have. And I know that's a lot of feedback, and I'm not sure if there are answers from anyone, but I guess I just wanted to share where I'm at with the way in which we are reviewing the policy language we have in place, separate from potential policy language updates in the future. But we are building resources that, to my knowledge, currently do not have a clear path for how they will be fully compliant by 2050. And so that is a challenge for me on a review of we are sufficiently compliant with the policy language we have in place today. And I know that again, that is a lot of talking, and I'd be glad to hear a response.
So thank you. Thank you for the position. Just a reminder, I think this is important for clarification. And as you see on the top of the page, on the right-hand corner, there's a very important word, and it says net. Net zero carbon production by 2050. That's the direction that I have from the board, and I think it warrants a little bit of unpacking in here. And to your point, Chair Williams, I think our direction, and this is part of the Power in the Future 2050 vision, is every choice we make leads to a cleaner world, and we're certainly making strides. All the planning goes into the plan, all the operating plan looks at reducing. The near-term generation plan looks at producing 90% of the generation be from renewable sources. At every single point, including in our pathways to decarbonization, we looked at the word net zero carbon, which means that there will be offsets. By the time we get to 2050, we're looking at a generation fleet that will still have emissions, and the netting will come through offsets. So to your point about us making investments today that potentially won't have a way to have non-emitting fuel in 2050, that is still from my perspective, and what the team is looking at is still in compliance with the goal of net zero carbon production by 2050. If the goal were to be zero, absolute zero, then I think your point would be very, very well made. So it's just a reminder that I don't think we're in disagreement. I think we're all trying to get to the lowest possible emission profile. However, I do want to remind public and the reason why we're putting in the portfolio that we have planned is because of our goal that I have right now, net zero.
Right, and I believe we are also in agreement, and I appreciate the work that we are doing to meet the needs of our customers and plan for the future. In the category of net, though, we do understand what net will mean. There are some things that can mean net. I mean, and I have not yet seen sufficient investigation into what will be necessary in order to achieve the net zero related to these resources. There are different things you can do. Again, you can capture at site, you can direct air capture, you can get offsets somewhere else. I have significant concerns about validity of offsets, but I have not seen sufficient information about how will that occur. And that leaves a huge amount of work to be done to validate that in the future. And so sufficiently compliant feels to me as though we are guaranteeing that we will definitely reach this by the end outcome. And I feel like that is possible, and I do trust that we will. But I do not feel that there has been sufficient information presented to guarantee that today, that we know what will be necessary. And so with the uncertainty in the future, I guess that's where my desire for additional discussions comes, is that, we know that there is additional work to be done, but we have not discussed that at the time when we make some of the decisions that we know will be in the future. And that does narrow our options on what will be required. How much direct air capture, for example, would be required to offset the emissions from our fleet in 2050? We don't necessarily know, and I'm not asking for a specific quantification, but I haven't seen anything to evaluate what that might mean based on decisions that we're making today. And that is a challenge for me.
That's a fair point. I think 27 years into the future and lots of things could happen. And I really appreciate the challenge because it really shows that a passion from you and from board members on achieving this cleaner world. I don't have an answer to you right now. That I think that these may warrant more conversation with systems committee about the shape that SC7 takes into the future. What conditions do we need to see 2030, 2040, 2045 in order for us to know that we're getting closer and closer to this net zero by 2050 status? There will be many things that we're going to have to do with our with our generation fleet. We have aging infrastructure. North Omaha Station, we talked about that a lot, but we haven't talked about other generation units that we have, right? And so how do we gradually and responsibly look at decommissioning those or adding different technologies for carbon emission reductions so that we can get to that future in 2050. Lots of work going on. And again, I am very pleased. I'm very proud of what the team has done. But to your point, it's not crystal clear. It's not black and white. And it's really up to the board to decide, are we sufficiently compliant? Are we in the right direction? Knowing that direction is 27 years away from the ultimate target. And so I really appreciate your challenge.
And I guess, Director Moody, to your question about the recommendation from the Systems Committee is sufficiently compliant, to that last language, are we moving in the right direction is a different status on a review on a monitoring report. That is a different recommendation from the committee, that we are in the direction of compliance. And perhaps Scott can help me with the language that we use that is not sufficiently compliant, but it is moving in the direction.
I don't have it off the top of my head, but yes.
Okay.
I don't want to make it up.
Right. Thank you. But the other recommendation on a monitoring report that is not the sufficiently compliant, the other moving in the direction. And so I guess those are my thoughts, is that, I agree with that, but the language of sufficiently compliant is a challenge for me.
So a couple thoughts. One is to your question about clarity, Director Williams, for how that will get executed in the future. I mean, it's really hard for us to predict exactly what the environment around us is going to be like in 2 years, let alone 27. I mean, if we backtrack 2 years and think about the volume of information that we've learned between then and now, and what we understand and what we know about the environment around us, and what we know about how difficult it's been to bring 4 to 600 megawatt. Like, I'm not going to rehash all that, but there's a lot of information that we've learned. And as we went through the near-term generation proposal, I'm confident that every single month when we heard about that, we heard the words, this aligns with our pathway towards net zero. Period, full stop. And so I personally, as chair of the systems committee, don't necessarily expect, and I don't want anybody to tell me that they've got clarity for what it looks like in 5 years, let alone 27, because I think that would be disingenuous. And I'm confident that the team has all of those things in the back of their mind, and perhaps that's not doing it justice, is thinking about all of those things as it's planning what the resources are going to be. So understand the concern, but I don't share it. In terms of where we are with the recommendation, I mean, the committee was pretty fully supportive of this recommendation. So you've offered some concerns around it. I guess I'll just open the floor to see if anybody else shares the same concerns. And now might be a good time to point to our operating principles. Don't let the desire for consensus paralyze board action. So if anybody else wants to hop in, please do. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess what I'm hearing from you, Director Williams, would more be a revision to SD7. I feel like everything that they're doing is in compliance with SD7. And you're looking for like demonstrations of things in the future where to me, when I read SD7, it's current. And so I'm definitely in support of that recommendation because of that reason. I hear what you're saying and appreciate what you're saying, but because of how SD7 is written, I think they're absolutely in compliance with it.
Yeah, and I recognize that a future policy update is something different than a review of a monitoring report today. And I guess my desire to have seen updates to SD7 over recent years that has not yet gone fulfilled, I guess is what leads me to the concern about a recommendation that says sufficiently compliant today. And so I do look forward to that update in the future, but with the language we have and the things that have been reported to date and the anticipated next actions, I do not have sufficient clarity that we are sufficiently compliant as of now.
Noted. Anybody else?
Yeah, so if you look at slide 3, which is the essence of SD7, it just says that number 2 is it will conduct operations in a manner that strives for the goal of net zero carbon production. Doesn't say we have a clear plan to get there. Doesn't say we know the what or the how. We know what we're striving for. We don't know the how. And I think we were pretty clear when we set that net zero goal that we don't absolutely have the technology to reach that at this point in time necessarily. So, I think if we look at the wording here, Clint and his team and all of OPPD is in compliance with what we've set down as an expectation at this point in time. So thank you for all your work and to your team. This is hard. I mean, emissions are emissions and it's system wide. It's not just OPPD. So I think that we are making strides that we didn't make before. And yes, we brought those emissions down 30% in the past, but going forward, I'm really encouraged that we have with Clint being on board, with Cliff being on board, I'm sorry, we have more focus on this, and I'm really, I think it's encouraging that we're moving in this direction.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
I have comments to make on this, but I think, are we concluding? You're gonna get to this.
Yes, so she was pointing at any other
Reflections.
thoughts, reflection side. I want to give you some space. Anything on your mind?
Just to say that I think this is sufficiently compliant, this report. And I think we have to be careful not to judge ourselves here and now by aspirations 27 years down the road. Because we just don't have sufficient information to be able to say how we're going to do that. This is going to unfold. And I'm pretty confident that OPPD will be one of the first utilities to know how we're going to make this happen. But this is a worldwide problem. So to say, we can't possibly prove this is sufficiently met, I think that's a little arrogant of us to think about that. So I support sufficient and look forward to what will happen in the next years to come.
Thank you, Director Spurgeon. Any following let's go back one more, sorry, before we go into reflections. Any other comments, questions on the recommendation? Otherwise, we're going to move forward with that as stated. Okay, now the next slide, additional reflections, Director Wagner.
Thank you. Hearing the discussion that's unfolded today and being, I would say, curious about how our discussions will occur in systems to refine SD7 over the coming months. I'm my view, I'm gonna create a parallel here to how we design net zero buildings. Keeping in mind net zero in that context means the same thing as it means here at the utility. So when we're designing net zero buildings, we aim at an energy use intensity goal. It doesn't mean that that goal is zero. It's, you know, for an office building, it might be 25 kBtu per square foot. And then, because that's then the number that is more easily offset on site with renewable resources. So I'm wondering if the same type of approach could, this is a suggestion, could be applied here to the utility, where we identify a carbon intensity goal that then puts us in striking distance of net zero emissions as technologies, as we're able to build technologies, as we're able to replace technologies, and that might help us understand, like when we're looking at the near-term generation proposal or things like that in the future. I think that that will help us have a better understanding of the value of that 90% renewable and how that attributes to the bigger thing. We also don't have a static system. When we're looking at buildings, we're building the building, and it's not likely to change a lot over its life. We're working with a very dynamic system here that continues to build. Our community continues to grow. I don't want us to solely focus on a carbon emission intensity number, but I think that that might help us orient around the progress we're making towards putting the district in striking distance of getting to net zero in 27 years down the road. So just an observation here, kind of tying all of the ideas together. That might be a good framework for us to take back to SD or to the systems and unpack a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that's a good fodder for us to kind of incorporate into the mix when we talk about the upcoming revisions minute. And I know we've also talked about, you know, 5 years ago, we had a CO2 per kilowatt hour metric that we were measuring. We shifted away from that because we wanted to really focus on the absolute number. But given the growth, can't help but wonder if that's something that we should be more mindful of. And maybe that's not the goal, but that's at least something that a really important data point given growth. Okay.
Both and.
So, but it could be both. Yeah. Need a bingo card. Okay. Thank you for that, Director Bogner. Any other reflections, colleagues?
I think very important here, just if I may, on the connecting to PF 2050, absolutely. I think that's fantastic acknowledgement. I think on the growth, load growth, just this year, summer peak load 10% higher, winter peak load 17% higher. Yet we're not talking about a commensurate increase in emissions. If anything, we're looking at continuing to lower them. So I think that acknowledgement that we continue to serve a lot more gigawatt hours, and we're going to do that with a lower and better greenhouse gas emission profile. I think it's very much in line with the PF 2050, Power in the Future 2050 vision. The other thing that I want to bring to light here is that, as Director Williams accurately mentioned, the majority, the bulk of our emissions come through our generation portfolio, no doubt about it. And there will be many changes happening in the future. Those changes are going to be discrete. We cannot expect to see every single year changes because a lot of those are tied to a single turbine generator. And when that one's decommissioned, then you see big decreases. So what do we do in the meantime? We have over 2,000 women and men who are working at the district day in and day out. How do we continue to focus that culture change? Because there's a big portion of a cultural change within the organization. And this is where I commend Cliff and what he's doing with the sustainability programs and the sustainability playbook. Every choice we make leads to a cleaner world. It may not have the same effect on greenhouse gas emissions, but for us at least, I'm looking at what we're doing with bucket trucks, with our fleet, with water conservation, with environment conservation, the work that our men and women at our plants, how we're operating those plants, getting the maximum output for the minimum generation, keeping those plants tuned, if you will. But yes, they're emitting, But how can we limit those emissions by having a really well-maintained plan? And I think that's going to be part of our focus, and that's what ties that PF 2050 and those milestones. We don't have a lot of milestones in the next 5 years, other than North Omaha Station. But in the next 5 years, we don't have a lot of milestones for big, measurable reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. What else can we do? How can we continue to change that culture that eventually will get us to not only that net zero by 2050, but perhaps exceed? I think this is the work that we do today. How does it position us to more than exceed that? So I'm just tying that back into how this is tying to the Power in the Future 2050. I will end with, and I'm really excited about the work that's going to happen in the next few months for SD7 revisions. And that has to do with perfect power, not cleaner world. Because clearly a path to a cleaner world has to take into account reliability and resilience. And conversations I've had recently with a few of you, it's what are those conditions necessary that we need to see in our system that will provide the framework for us to then openly and very clearly talk about, okay, what are the next steps for us to change operations at Nebraska City Station, and Jones Street Station, and Sarpy County Station? What are the conditions that we need to see in the system that will tell us, okay, we're actually increasing, we're making our system more robust, more reliable, that will then be the prerequisite for us to have meaningful discussions and plans for emissions reductions. I think that this is where you see this Power in the Future 2050 vision coming together, matching perfect power with customer freedom, all in concert with a cleaner world. Hopefully that helps a little bit tie that vision into what we're doing here.
Thank you.
Greg, you asked about looking forward and potential future SD7 updates. During near-term generation, we received a graphic that shows projected future emissions. I found that very helpful. And just for discussion by systems, not sure if that is a metric specifically about projected future emissions, or if that is something that can be reported during the monitoring report, or how that might be incorporated. But the projection on future emissions is something that I was very interested in, and this was the first time it was done. And again, I significantly appreciate that being incorporated into that presentation. And to go along with that, a projection on cumulative emissions for the future would be something I'm also very interested in as we discuss potential updates to 7.
Yep.
And those are closely related. And again, not sure that is specifically related to a metric, but a way that we can anticipate where we're going, similar to what we're doing with other types of demand projections and financial projections.
Yeah, I'm confident that that will be part of what's on the table for discussion, or at least a key input.
Great, thanks.
Okay. Any last comments and reflections?
If I could just make a short comment on
Please.
input at PF 2050. I think I went to my third day here at OPPD. I went to a comprehensive conference at the city on PF 2050. It was like trying to swallow a tidal wave. It was an amazing amount of information. And it's one of the reasons I came to Public Power. I think we really combine these really, ambitious and optimistic, I think, and forward-thinking views, thinking out to 2050, but we're coupled with the discipline that comes from running a business. And I think that's really important because you have to have both and balance them out as you move forward. So I just wanted to reiterate to everyone how excited it reflects the real positive parts about Public Power and OPPD in particular. And I look forward to meeting with all of you. I'll be talking to all the board members over the next few weeks and start talking about some of the ideas I have, share some of the thoughts that Director Bogner has, and on our approach on getting a work plan to everyone in December. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Cliff. Thanks to the team for all of the hard work. Kicking it back to you, Director Williams.
Yeah. So we do have more items for the Systems Committee planned after lunch, but for now we are planning a lunch break. So I guess it's planned for 12:30 return, 35 minutes. See you back then.
Hold on.
Okay.
All right, very good. We have 2 approval items today for your consideration. Both of them are focused on generation. Obviously, our generation is key for us to be able to continue to have a reliable system, deliver electrons. So investing in those resources are super important in the nuclear space. This first item here is for Sarpy County Unit 5, and it's for A and B turbine. Done some inspections on those, and if you wanna, I think we have a picture of what that looks like. We've performed a lot of inspections on those and found some damage that we need to take care of within those units. It was inspected in September of 2023, and as you can see, some damage was there. The last time that these two turbines, it's a single turbine, but it has two different parts to it here, was refurbished was 2008 and then 2012. So we're kind of in that time frame where we expect this kind of wear and tear to show up for these generators. In this particular case, there are older facilities. The parts, the equipment, very proprietary. I'll get it out here in just a second. And really only the original manufacturer would have those. And so it used to be Pratt and Whitney. They were purchased out by Mitsubishi, and so that's who we'd be working with on this particular fix. The district's engineer certified that it is proprietary in nature. With that, we are requesting an engineer certificate to be able to go through the negotiation process and work through all the details needed to work on this. And so what will happen is these two parts to the generator will be picked up, put on a truck, basically, and taken to Connecticut. So what questions might you have?
I don't have any colleagues.
Pretty good. A lot of years of service before you had to.
We're pleased with that. A little bit emergent. We were planning on doing this in 2024, but some things have shown up very recently. And do the work at this point in time and stuff.
How long will that unit be offline then?
It depends on the timing of getting the equipment back, but we're talking about probably February. So we'll get through the winter. Luckily,
So from now until February?
That's correct.
Yeah, it's already off.
It's 50 megawatts.
It's not large, but it's large enough, and we prefer to have it over the winter period, and we'll do whatever we can to try to move to the left, but likely.
Okay.
All right. Next item.
Correct.
All right, this next one is a labor. Section. So they're original 79. Fantastic that they've lasted as long as they have. But what this contract would do would remove the old and replace with the new. I think we have some pictures just to kind of show what these areas look like. We have a number of tubes and just for instance how large of an area it is. So it's pretty sizable in nature. It will be completed during the spring outage here in 2024 as part of our normal outage process. The materials we already have on hand, some of those were approved by the board in recent work meetings. So we're ready to go and perform these replacements. 2 bids were received and both were determined to be legally and technically responsive. PEI Construction Services has performed this exact same work for us in the past, so we know them very well. And they were the best bid. As you probably noticed, the engineer's estimate is right on top of the 2 offers. So I'd like to see that one comes together in that particular way. With that, I'll open it up to questions. It's the pictures, right? That's what picture focus. We'll have to keep that up. So anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Troy. Okay, we are now on to Integrated Operations Center, Mr. McCormick.
Good afternoon. I have one approval item for your consideration today. The Integrated Operations Center, or IOC, is part of our master facility plan. is also designated as one of our corporate priorities going forward. The IOC will replace the current facility that has served us well over the last 40 years. We have outgrown that current facility and the site is not adequate to meet our growing needs. In order to supply safe and reliable electricity for the next several decades, we need to build a new facility, and we plan on using an engineering certification for the construction process. Any questions?
Well, for public awareness, we discussed this in pretty good detail in closed session, summarizing that this is a highly complex facility that we're building, and so the need for an engineer's certificate here is to me pretty clear as the chair. Colleagues, any questions from Mr. McCormick today? Okay, that's it. Thank you, Kevin. Let's keep trucking along. We've got 2 items for Mr. Foch. Sale of real property, this public improvement, and then he will move on to the acquisition of land rights for.
Excellent. First item is the sale of property for UNMC Saddle Creek Campus Public Improvement. There's roadway improvements along Saddle Creek Road and Jones Street to accommodate the city of Omaha's UNMC Saddle Creek Campus Public Improvements Project. Selling 3,592 square feet. There is an exhibit in Diligent that shows a picture of this. A couple of quick facts. The board staff linkage policy BL10 does require board approval to sell, transfer property ownership. Also, in taking a look at this, a sale of property does not adversely affect any operations now or in the future, and we did have this independently appraised at the value. And really, by having board formal approval, it does make it much easier for the buyer to ensure that they have the right financing, because indeed the transaction is recognized as being official and legitimate. Are there any questions on this? We can go to the next slide, perhaps, and show the picture, just for awareness.
Scott, this is the area on the east side of Saddle Creek with the wall and the trees and something almost like a little plaza. Is that right?
Yeah, this is the east side, and here's what we're selling. Correct, Jake?
No,
we've been west.
he is right. It's got trees and some pillars. It's, yeah, right there on the east side of Saddle Creek.
Right here.
It's a portion of that.
It's the sliver that's dotted. Over, yeah, that like triangular piece.
My apologies.
No, that's right. So will that lead to a reconstruction of the public improvements in the area along Saddle Creek? I know this is mostly a UNMC master plan discussion item, but just, there's a little space there that's,
Yeah, that will become road right away. So it'll be up to the city and UNMC to beautify that. They are acquiring those trees as well as that property, about 3,600 square feet. But I imagine they will do some improvements of the right of way there.
Excellent.
Do we have any infrastructure in that?
Right in the area that we're selling to. Jake, do we have any infrastructure? Right, what we're selling?
Yes, there is underground services. We have relocated some transmission poles and stuff in the area. We will maintain easement rights in the area of the properties that we sell. So we'll have the right for the stuff that's there now as well as anything else we put in.
Thank you. I should have you up. Any other questions? All right. The second item is the acquisition of land rights for Enterprise Operations Technology Communications Network asset located in southeastern Odo County. And what we're asking the board is to authorize eminent domain as necessary to acquire fee ownership or permanent easements of land for existing Enterprise Operations Technology Communication Network asset. We know that this is critical to our system, and without getting into a bit more discussion, I will just say it's pertinent that we get this approval. So we'll be seeking that during the board meeting. Any questions?
And again, for public awareness, we discussed this in much greater detail this morning in closed session. Excellent.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brush. Systems Management Nuclear Oversight Committee, Russ, Director Williams.
Great, perfect, thank you. Other business. First up, we've got the confirmation of the board meeting agenda. So everything is listed as usual on the consent action items. Are there any items that we'd like to move from the consent agenda to a discussion action item?
Can we move the UNMC vote to the, not for conversation, but my husband is on a board at the at UNMC, so I'd like to abstain from that vote. I know previously we had collectively put them together and made a note in the minutes. I'm not super comfortable with that process, so I'm going to ask that it goes into the action.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
That's fine.
SD7, we want to move to board.
Sounds good. We're good with everything else on the consent agenda then? Great, sounds good. Thank you. The review of the board work plan looking forward. I know we've talked about these in the committees. Are there any items from the committees that we feel need to be updated into the board work plan at this time that are not already reflected? And again, I know this is very, very small on the screen, so if you're looking at it on your screen, maybe you can see it, but generally we make these updates in committees, get them over here. I know we talked about several in governance.
Yeah, so I'll just highlight that governance had several here at the bottom and then on the next page that came out of the workshop. And we identified some finish dates for those that will occur over the next 2 quarters. So we'll be discussing more of those here at all committees as they become relevant to conversation.
Sounds good. And we've already seen some of the things from the governance workshop that were action items translate into action, literally physically on the desks in front of us with the board policies, all those kinds of things. So looking forward to seeing these move forward as well. Great. I think we're good on the board work plan then. And the last item would be the the agenda item now says new generation and transmission update, and we'll make sure to use those terms correctly in the future.
Please note the name change.
Yes.
Broader, yes. So
New generation and transmission.
we have Megan Walker here, who's the manager of construction management, to share updates on new natural gas generation. We also have Carol Wozniak, I think, here, who will later come up and give an update on the solar piece.
Good afternoon. Advance a couple slides, please.
It's working on it.
Okay. We'll go over our Standing Bear Lake and Turtle Creek stations, and then Carol will give us an update on solar.
Well, the slide presentation is what we're going through.
Just go. Okay.
I think most of us have the pictures on our screens, and for those on the public, we can.
Yep. Okay. For our Standing Bear Lake station, we're just under 74% for site progress. The substation is nearing closer to completion. They have been installing static mass cable installation. The fencing around the substation yard is getting finalized. And then in the substation control house, they are doing checkouts and final testing. On the transmission side of things, the structures are up at site and they're starting to install the conductors. That should be done here in the next few weeks. On the generation side of things, they are installing foundations for our emergency diesel generator for the site, as well as installation on some of the tanks at site for our service water and urea tanks. From a generation perspective, also from a risk perspective, we're looking at still awaiting our low voltage switch gear. That is anticipated to be at site by the end of December, end of the year. This week, we do have our engineer procure construct vendor who is responsible for that contract, as well as members from our OPPD project team doing a factory site visit to assess the situation, make sure things are on track and progressing well for that to help minimize any risk for the project on Standing River Lake. For Turtle Creek Station, we're just under 69% complete. Key areas, the substation is mostly complete. Where they've done a site walk down and kind of just going through resolution of final checklist items that were identified during that walk down. So that's looking pretty good. There is a aerial view of that once in your probably your project deck. As far as generation is concerned, we are erecting the fuel building on site. That's going well, as well as progress on unit 1 and 2 continue. In particular, they're kind of working on what's called the isophase bus ducting, which goes from the generator to the generator step-up transformer. And then really happy to report that our 2 generator step-up transformers, which was kind of our last major equipment that was to come to the site, has been delivered safely to the site. First one was delivered October 1st through the 2nd, and then the second one October 8th through the 9th. And so appreciate all the work both for the project team, as well as a lot of our support at Elkhorn Service Center. We have a line crew that supports those heavy hauls, as well as local entities. So those went really smoothly, and happy to report those are on site and on foundation.
So does that mean that all of the heavy haul for both sites is now completed?
That is a correct statement. Yeah.
Great. Well, congrats on that. Those are interesting projects with wonderful photos.
It's fun, but yeah.
And glad to have it completed. That's wonderful.
It was safe, so it was good to, that went well. And if we go one more slide, if it's working still. We've got some more recent aerial shots of the sites. On the left-hand side is Standing River Lake. It's facing east, and you can kind of see the substation's kind of at the top of the picture, the engine hall's right below it, and then there's the stacks of the radiator banks. On the right-hand side is Turtle Creek Station, aerial shot, kind of looking, standing at the south of the site, looking north. You'll see kind of from left to right, it's actually Unit 2, then Unit 1, and then you'll see our admin building and our water treatment building, and then the substation's kind of at the top of the picture. So with that, that concludes my update for Standing Bear Lake and Turtle Creek, but happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
We completed a couple of tours recently of Turtle Creek Station. You were able to be there, and a few elected officials. I think it's really important, again, going back to stakeholder engagement and then the project delivery team to keep those connected. And I'm very, very pleased. Thank you, Megan, for the work you and the team have done and continue to do, and for the many months still ahead of us. At some point, we'll have other opportunities for board members to engage and come in and see the amazing work that's happening. It's, to me, it's pretty remarkable to think that 18 months ago, this was flat. There wasn't anything in there, and now we have two new power generation stations. We're looking at delivering those, energizing them in August of next year. I think dates change a little bit, but that's going to be very important. The sooner we can get them energized and pushing energy into the grid, the better off we're going to be. This is a key component into the North Omaha plan. In addition to having the physical plants ready and energized, we also need the generation connection agreement from SPP. But that one doesn't do anything if we don't have the plants ready. So I think having those two moving on schedule are very important for the rest of the portfolio.
I appreciate being invited to the tour with City Papillion, Sarpy County, Senator Holdcroft. Yeah, great to be the person to see things as we go along. So appreciate the coordination on the tour. Javier, you mentioned the generation interconnection. I know that's not a construction related update, and it was reflected on a timeline earlier, but is there any additional work or any additional update about kind of everything's on schedule, things are moving forward?
We have not heard anything, any different plans from SPP. Still, we're looking at Q4 of next year. And then depending on what those results are, there might be some infrastructure needs associated with that. But right now, the timeline hasn't moved, which is a good thing. Because in the past, we've seen that timeline move to the right. And so right now, we still get the commitment from SPP that it's Q4.
So we anticipate the construction to be done prior to the GIA being finalized?
Correct. So the idea here is we have an interim generation interconnection. So the idea is as soon as these plants are energized, we will start turning them on and start injecting power into the grid, even in the absence of the final interconnection. We have that interim permission to interconnect and put them to good use. The final interconnection is the key element for us to then move to decommission North Omaha 1, 2, and 3. That's a key piece because currently the interim interconnection agreement we would get for these two new stations could be revoked, and that is the piece that we want to make sure that we have assurance that these two plants are ready to permanently and irrevocably interconnect.
Perfect.
Turn it over to Carol.
Hi. I'm Carol Wozak, Manager of Renewable Energy Resources. I'm going to give you the update on our solar projects. So starting off with Platteview Solar, construction is going well. AES Blue Ridge Power is approximately 70% complete with the construction. The OPPD substation work is complete up to the point of connecting to the facility substation. So AES substation construction is about 50% complete. The generator step-up transformer is scheduled to be delivered by the end of October. All of the modules have been installed at the south and central parcels, and they're working on module wiring and setting the inverters. And then on the north parcel, we're about 90% complete with the installation of the modules and working on the module wiring. All of the underground direct current cables have been installed, and about 85% of the medium voltage cables have been installed. So the team is working on the documents for commissioning and operation. If you go to the next slide, I'll show you some pictures of progress. So on the right-hand side, you have an aerial of the central parcel, which has all of the modules installed. And then the left-hand side is the aerial of the south parcel. So next slide is a K Junction update. So for K Junction, we do have a generation interconnection agreement that was effective in August. So the team continues to work through the milestones in that agreement. We're also evaluating all of the project documentation, working on developing a schedule. We began discussions with NPPD to understand the timelines related to the associated transmission network and facility upgrades. We are working through supporting Village of McCool Junction on the development of the solar regulations that will be needed. And we continue our community engagement efforts and communication. We are having a community connect event next Thursday, October 26th in the evening in Pool Junction to just listen and hear from the residents and all involved. And then we did also create an OPPD Community Connect page for this project that people can go out and get more information related to it.
Carol, would you mind talking a little bit about our partnership and collaboration with Perennial Public Power and NPPD?
We are, I guess, talking with them about potentially, sharing part of the facility. Just high-level discussions at this point, but working through on potential partnerships.
Thank you. And I think that's important because again, this facility it is outside of our service territory, very important for our portfolio. But as we've said before, we're not alone on experiencing load growth and aging of infrastructure and resource adequacy issues. And I think this is where Nebraska has one of the biggest strengths that we have as a state is that we're all public power. And for us to talk and collaborate and work together with our sister utilities out in that area of the state and Perennial Power and NPPD is very, very important. So those conversations are ongoing. We haven't reached any agreement of anything yet, but I wanna communicate to the board that that's our intention, is to open up lines of communication, and if there is interest and need, that we're very much looking to that, because this is not the end game. There will be many other facilities that others will construct, and it'll be very important for us to also diversify our portfolio, diversify our risk by owning different parts of different assets in different regions of the state. Carol, thank you so much.
I'm sorry, on plat view, there was a timeline on the bottom of the screen. I didn't jump in when that was on, when we were talking about that. Can you let us know where we're at in the timeline? Can we see that slide by chance?
Yeah, so the timeline, we're currently in the construction phase of it. So the orange dots, we've completed the design and engineering site preparation. We're in the construction. And then we'd be moving into the commissioning of that.
Oh, I see. Okay, I apologize. I saw September 27 down there below operations. I thought, wow, that seems different.
Yeah.
That's just the date on the slide. It's not the date of the operations. It just coincidentally aligns with the bullet.
May of 2024 is generally the date that we're looking for.
Yeah. The commercial operation date is May 1st.
Perfect. Thank you.
We're excited about having going into next summer.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, with that, that is all of the items on our agenda for today. And so I think we can conclude. Thanks very much. See you on Thursday.